Well, let's bring in our guest now. In Taipei is Fangyu Chen, who is an assistant professor of political science at Soochow University. In Beijing, Victor Gao is vice president of the Centre for China and Globalization, a leading Chinese think tank. And in Tokyo, Tomohiko Taniguchi is a special advisor at the Fujitsu Future Studies Centre. He's previously advised the Japanese cabinet during the Shinzo Abe administration. Thank you very much for being with us here on Inside Story. We really do appreciate your time. Fangyu, can I please begin with you? You're in Taiwan. We've seen military exercises time and time again from China, especially in recent years. Do these feel different, though?
Well, I think Taiwanese people are getting used to this, and because we have been under the threat of China for a very long time. So last time, especially the 2022, the military drill, which is a big blockade of the Taiwan Strait, where we see that all of the world, especially the international media, are so nervous about that. But for the Taiwanese people, well, this is just very routine of our daily lives because China is now flying a lot of warships and the fighter jets around Taiwan Strait, and it become a new normal in the Taiwan Strait. I think that the people just get used to that, and also people are discussing about how to strengthen our own defense capability.
Victor, I don't imagine that is the message that Beijing wants to hear in response to these drills. The People's Liberation Army said they are a strong punishment for separatist acts. I mean, is that a total overreaction to the president's inauguration speech?
No, I think Lai Ching-te's speech on May the 20th, as far as the One China policy is concerned, is tantamount to a declaration of war. He risks the peace between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. And China need to do something to teach him a lesson and to warn the separatists in Taiwan that don't go beyond the point of no return, because otherwise China, as demonstrated by this round of the joint military exercises, will decide to blockade Taiwan. And that will really crumble the economy in Taiwan, and it will really force Lai Ching-te to the corner. Because if he tries to resurrect the unfinished civil war between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait in 1949, for example, that's what he will get. And if he wants to bring disaster to the people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait by risking the so-called Taiwanese independence or separatism, that's what he will get. And this is not against the people in Taiwan. This is very focused on the separatists in Taiwan. Now, in the world of today, no one can recognize both China and Taiwan at the same time, because that's in violation of the One China policy. Any attempt to push Taiwan into a separate, sovereign, independent country is dead before it's starting. And that's the lesson that China needs to teach Lai Ching-te. And if he really wants to become more and more desperate to push for the so-called independence of Taiwan, he will destroy peace across two sides of the Taiwan Strait, and he will bring calamities not only to the people in Taiwan, but many other stakeholders in this part of the world. We are at a critical moment. We need to promote peace rather than allow people like Lai Ching-te to destroy peace.
OK, Victor, thanks so much for that. But Tomohiko, you were listening to all of that. Do you think, is this a declaration of war like Victor outlined? And how is Japan and other regional players actually reacting to this? Is the whole region on edge?
I think it's quintessential Mr. Gao, who speaks extreme rhetoric almost all the time. This is not going to invite war at all. Mr. Gao has just spoken along with the carefully crafted lines spelled out in the white paper, Taiwan white paper, issued in 2022, in which the Chinese Communist Party said clearly that the so-called quote-unquote separatist must be removed, which is why Mr. Gao is targeting at an individual, the President Lau. But by the way, he is the president, democratically elected in the elections conducted very much in a peaceful way. Taiwan is an exemplar of a democratic process, which a lot of countries in the world should look up to now.
I want to bring up a map that was put out by the People's Liberation Army now, which basically outlines exactly where the drills are being held. It basically shows the drills encircling the entire island, Feng Yu. That's obviously a deliberate tactic to try and intimidate Taiwan. Is it working?
Well, hard to say how is it work, because last time we do see that people around the world, I mean the boats and also the airplanes just have to escape, I mean to avoid to fly through this region, because well there will be missiles and also a lot of warships and the fighter jets. So yeah, it's not only intimidation of Taiwan but also all around the world. I mean yeah, it's a typical bully. I mean, you can see the bully language of that.
Beijing has sort of intimated that this could be a prelude to further punishment, as the Chinese have put it. What sort of repercussions, what sort of further repercussions could we see? Are we talking sanctions here?
Allow me to add a point first. The distinguished panelist from Japan mentioned the Japanese unconditional surrender in 1945. He pretends to forget that after Japan unconditionally surrendered in China, there was a civil war. The nationalist government was defeated and fled from mainland China to Taiwan.
Yes.
That's the root cause of the separation of the two sides of the Taiwan Strait. And the unfinished civil war doesn't give any qualification for Taiwan to become a separate, independent, sovereign country. It is part of China. Ask the Japanese government whether China is one China, whether Japan recognizes Taiwan as being part of China. If the panelist from Japan says, no, Japan doesn't recognize that, he is overturning China-Japanese diplomatic relations, because the cornerstone of China-Japanese diplomatic relations is for Japan to acknowledge that there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China.
Okay.
Does he want to contradict the official policy of Japanese government?
Okay.
No, he does not have the courage or the bravery to do that.
Okay, Tomohiko.
He does not need to fool the
Victor, I'm going to jump in
world.
here because I want to give Tomohiko a chance to respond. Are you overturning China's relationship status?
Thank you. There is one thing in common between the Japanese position and the American position as regards the so-called one China policy. The Tokyo government at the time, and Washington, D.C. as well, acknowledged that the Chinese Communist Party says this and that. That's it. They have neither the United States nor Japan has ever said that we subscribe to Chinese version of China policy. Remember that Chiang Kai-shek in 1971-72 also strongly asserted that Taiwan is a legitimate legitimate entity in the international community. And so the United States and Japan also took consideration into that position as well. So the Tokyo government said they acknowledged what the Chinese Communist Party said. Okay. Read the text.
You bring up the United States, obviously incredibly important here. I just want to give our viewers a bit of a reminder of the US policy on Taiwan. Now, Washington switched diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China in 1979, a few years after then President Richard Nixon visited Beijing. The US follows the One China policy, which recognises the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government, but it only acknowledges Beijing's position that Taiwan is part of China. Now, this means the US has formal relations with China and unofficial relations with Taiwan. In the absence of diplomatic ties, the Taiwan Relations Act provides a framework for relations and protects US security and commercial interests on the island. But the legislation is unclear on whether Washington would defend Taiwan against an invasion. This policy has come to be known as strategic ambiguity. Feng Yu, I want to go to you next. How confident is Taiwan that the US will actually have its back if China does step up its military and actually invades Taiwan?
Well, after 1979, the U.S. has a Taiwan Relations Act, which is a domestic law that requires the U.S. to maintain its relationship with Taiwan, although it's unofficial, although it's without any diplomatic recognition. However, the U.S. and Taiwan stays in a very close relationship, including the military cooperation. And right now we have many projects that has the diplomatic, economic, and the military cooperation. So I think that's we don't have to talk about the so-called strategic ambiguity because we see such a strong tie. Also, I think for the Taiwanese, we have to assume that we have to fight for ourselves. We don't have to assume that, okay, so others will help, like the allies will help, because firstly, we have to build up our own defense capability. So that is very important. And I think also, I just gave a reminder to Mr. Gao that to read the Treaty of the Peace with Japan in 1951. And also, there's a treaty between Japan and Taiwan, the ROC government in 1953. So just read them and you can see a lot of things. So do not imagine your own world of the international law. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, well, I want to stick with hang on a sec, Victor.
Whatever that was signed between Japan and Taiwan in the 1950s was already superseded when Japan recognized the People's Republic of China and when Japan embraced the One China policy. That is the cornerstone of China-Japan relations. If the Japanese panelist wants to split the hair, he runs the risk of destroying China-Japanese diplomatic relations. He will be held as a criminal by Japanese law because he is doing huge damage to the fundamental interest of the Japanese people by breaking away China-Japanese diplomatic relations with each other.
Okay, I want to stick with
how high the stake is.
I want to get back to the US relationship with Taiwan. We've seen over the last two presidencies, both Biden and Trump have forged much closer ties with Taiwan, and Trump in particular distancing himself from China. How big of a worry is that when both of them are going to be going for the presidency come November?
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. In this year, 2024, there is this presidential election in the United States. Whether Trump or Biden eventually wins, that's the decision for the American people. However, the fact that there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China is carved in stone. Whether it will be Trump or it will be Biden, etc., no one can change that megatrend. And the panelists talked about whether the United States will send troops to defend Taiwan. It is illogical, indecent, illegal. Why? Why should the United States get involved in the resurrected civil war between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait? The United States will have no standing to fight on one side of the civil war against the other side of the civil war. Why should the United States spill the blood of the American soldiers for achieving Taiwanese independence? Anyone who indulges in that fantasy is out of his mind.
It's a military invasion. It's an invasion, not a civil war. Sorry. You are now using a military to invade Taiwan.
There is only one China. Read the papers. It's not aggression of one country to another. It will be a civil war. It will be like President Lincoln's war against the Confederation. It is not war between two countries. Taiwan will never be able to become an independent, separate country.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. Thanks very much, guys. Hang on a sec. I want to go to Tomohiko because Victor mentioned before that we're almost at the point of no return. Does it feel like that there in Tokyo? And what do you think is going to happen next?
It is the national security, it is the pride, it is the military that matter far, far more than economic buildup. Perhaps because China has grown so much economically. But unless and until they can annex Taiwan, they cannot fulfill the so-called China's dream, which makes it even more difficult. I think whether or not China invades into Taiwan is no longer a relevant question. When and how would be the relevant question.
Feng Yu, I want to come to you now. What do the Taiwanese people want? Because it feels like the country's been in limbo, stuck between these two superpowers, the US and China. How do the Taiwanese people want this to play out in the next couple of years?
Yes. So according to the public polls, so we see that a super majority of people, like 80 or 90% of people, think that we want the so-called status quo. And the most interesting thing is that people define status quo in different ways. So most of people define status quo as one country in each side. I mean, Taiwan is a side and the mainland China is another side. And because it's a fact, because since the 90s, we have been democratized and we elect our own system, our own president, our own government, and we have the military, we have a constitution, we have everything, every element of an independent sovereignty country. So people are now willing to defend ourselves, defend our democratic system. That is the status quo for most of people. People reject explicitly the proposal by China. That is a one country, two system. And also our government, the democratically elected government, reject the proposal of the one China principle, which says Taiwan is part of China. So we refuse it. People vote to resist invasion of China. That is very clear public polls in Taiwan.
Okay, Victor, we heard there that a war is up to President Xi. He's the one who's going to decide if there is an invasion or not. He has also said the military should be ready for a full-scale invasion by 2027. What do you think is going to happen? How likely do you think it is?
To unify Taiwan is not only something new, it is the policy of China ever since 1949, when the nationalist government fled from the mainland China to Taiwan. So don't pretend that this is something new. This just came over overnight. No, this has been consistent Chinese policy for the past 75 years. Therefore, please be assured, Taiwan will be reunified. We hope it will be achieved by peaceful means. But if Lai Ching-te and the separatists want to test fire, they will really test the fire, because eventually it may be achieved through non-peaceful ways. Now, the Taiwanese panelists talked about one country, two system. If they do not want to have one country, two system, eventually they will get one country, one system.
Okay.
That's the high probability event. Be prepared.
Okay, thank you so much, Victor. Thank you, all of you. We really do appreciate this very robust discussion and what is clearly a very sensitive